Now, away from matters in Nigeria, but still about Nigeria, U.S. President Donald Trump's statements has continued to draw both local and international reactions. Now, you would recall that the U.S. president has threatened military action if Nigerian government does not take swift action to end what he described as genocide against the Christian population. Joining us to discuss this is economist Dr. Ifediora Amobi. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So you've been following this story, and I know that you have a special place for Trump in your mind, right? So what's your overall reaction? Let's start from there. The allegation of Christian genocide, the recent remarks by Trump, the threat of military action in Nigeria. How do you see all of this? What has led to this, and why are we where we are right now?
Well, first of all, the timing. It took a few hours from the allegation of genocide to the threat and to possible action. Typically, and in international diplomacy, these things take a while because you need time for both governments or both parties to sit down and, discuss this and try and come up with solutions. In this era, we have gone past the era of gunboat diplomacy, whereby every little thing that happens, you threaten military action because you are a strong, powerful country. And so, when we look at the personality of Donald Trump, and given what he has done in the past and his utterances, and I say utterances because, he called Nigeria a disgraced country for apparently no reason, but that's Donald Trump. He tagged the killing a genocide. He uses words that can be quite, can actually be drawn from one end to the other. And if you don't have information, if you don't have data or figures, you would think that probably it's, Nigeria is a basket case. Whereas it's not. Now, my overall reaction is that, first and foremost, my gut feeling was, what exactly is behind this? What does Donald Trump want? Because I know personally that America's foreign policy and Donald Trump's foreign policy are two different things altogether. America's foreign policy towards Africa and towards Nigeria in particular is not what Donald Trump has stated. Nigeria and the US have had diplomatic relations, ever since the history of both countries. Nigeria has security treaties with the US. And these security treaties include things like counterterrorism, etc. Nigerian military also has treaties with the US military. Nigeria has security treaties with China, with Saudi Arabia, with the EU, with the UK, with numerous countries. And so, when you now come out of the blues, and I'm not saying that we don't have our own security challenges. Yes, we have that. We've had these killings that have gone on. We've had these targets, which have been predominantly Christian, related, no doubt, because the information is out there. We've had, and we know that the instigators of a lot of these things have been the Islamists, what we call, herdsmen, etc., but they're actually, terrorists. They've targeted villages, they've targeted communities, they've targeted people that have a different faith belief than they have. Those things are documented. However, we have also failed as a government and failed as a military to tackle this. Now, whether it's our fault or whether it is the strategy that, and I'd like to actually refer it as the cooperative strategy, whereby, and I talked about these treaties that we've had. If we have had all these treaties and supports and aids and, just barely a month or so ago, the US gave us almost $350 million for, insecurity. If we have had all these things over the years, why do we still have these insurrections going on? Why do we still have these terrorist killings? Why has it not abated? And why don't we have data, correct data on it? It starts getting, you start wondering and start thinking, is there something else? Because I don't see why we would be comfortable as a country doing what we're doing. We just talked about, the defections and all the flag waving and the brooms and everything and so on and so forth, which is more like a carnival.
Yeah.
All of those things happening in the same country where our people are being killed and slaughtered by our people.
You mentioned, you keep hinting, is there something else, and let me try and come from the American perspective. We know how Donald Trump negotiates. If he wants you to take off your shoes and you say no, he says let's amputate the leg. Goes very extreme to get something
absolutely
really small.
Right.
It's the art of the deal. I've read the book and I realized that that's basically been him since the 70s. So we know him. He's going to come out when he wants something small. He's going to negotiate you back to what he wants by going very extreme.
Mm-hmm.
But that aside, is it really out of the blues? Because I remember the former Trump administration, and even the Daily Sun carried it this morning, that they were surprised Buhari refused to aid them to stop the killings of Christians, particularly then it was, the Middle Belt and Northeast. They were surprised Buhari wouldn't help. So already they had listed a lot of, Boko Haram and Co as terrorists, even though we're calling them bandits. Mm-hmm. Then, when Biden came, Anthony Blinken delisted and they came back to, they were not listed as terrorist organizations again.
Mm-hmm.
So they came back and relisted them. So it's an 8-year process. Not really, we've not really just gone from, they've just really just opened the old books on us. 8 years worth of impressions and opinions on us, that this is how we see you, and you're not doing anything about it. And secondly, President Tinubu is appointing ambassadors now. Now, which is what should have happened since.
Yeah.
Who should have been lobbying Congress. But we now have the issue of the US-Nigeria relations, and many argue that, particularly under Obama, that relationship had been broken when Jonathan wasn't allowed to buy weapons, when Boko Haram escalated. So it seems as if Nigeria's relationship with the US depends on who is in power. The people in power have different intentions for
no, absolutely,
for Nigeria.
It's all about interest. Now, you mentioned the Obama administration, you mentioned Biden, and then Trump. Different individuals, different interests, but same US policy. And US foreign policy in Africa is about control. Whether you're controlling resources, whether you're controlling the people, it's all about having a grip on it. Now, and that's why I said it's a failure on our own part, because we haven't done anything significant, considering all the investments that have gone into security, considering the intelligence that we have, considering everything that we have gained, most especially internationally, and all the support that we have had. We're still battling what we regard as terrorist bandits. We're not talking about Nigeria fighting the war against another country that has a budget. So, do we know who the funders are? Are we coming in? Is it even the US itself? Or any other foreign government? In other words, are they biting us and blowing, that thing whereby,
the rats in body house.
Exactly.
Bite your leg
and then, blow it. Because it really goes beyond just what's on the surface. There's a lot that's going on underneath. And that's why we shouldn't particularly look at this as a religious, Muslim killing Christians. Muslims are killing Muslims. In the Southeast, Christians are killing Christians. It's a national problem. But we have to go beyond the sentiments. Okay, because I'm from the north, because I'm Christian, because I'm this, and look below the surface. What exactly is going on? Why hasn't the Nigerian military, with the budget that we give them over the years, been able to stem this terrorist activity?
That's a good angle for us to go into, because you talked about us going below the surface, and also still linking it to why the US is interested. I know recently they appointed, I forget his name, the former ambassador to Gambia. He's now the US Africa envoy, and they've changed their position in Africa. They're not doing aid again. Now ambassadors are rated by the amount of business you can do with countries.
Right.
They're not rated by aid again. US is not rated by aid again. It's their new policy. But we also look at, is it possible that they are looking at why the focus, because I agree that we have a lot of crimes in Nigeria. There are people who sadly call Nigeria a crime scene. There are crimes all over Nigeria.
Yeah.
But like I always believe that, the presence of other crimes does not mean the absence of one. That we have, Muslims killing Muslims does not mean that there is no deliberate attack on Christians in portions of the country.
Sure.
And maybe the US is focusing on that because it's in line with current international, maybe they have an international, anti-Islamist framework they are looking at, and they are following money, following weapons, following people, and maybe checking to maybe bring down strongholds in different countries. And maybe we have found ourselves becoming either a stronghold or a route.
Absolutely.
For weapons.
Yeah.
And I bring this back to our own, because you mentioned why can't our military handle it? And I want to bring this back to a complaint I've been hearing a lot of recently, which is that it seems the government is complicit. And we go back to the Abacha statement. If insurgency lasts more than 24 hours, the government has a hand in it.
Yeah.
We've seen Ihejirika, we've seen now Christopher Musa, we've seen the Operation Safe Haven man, Colonel Dauda. It seems as if the most effective military men are removed. Recently, the chief of air staff was changed to Anyeke. Mm-hmm. The former chief of air staff, to be very honest, the immediate past one, I wish Anyeke all the best. But his immediate predecessor, actually, in my opinion, carried out some of the most successful air bombings in recent history.
Right.
Did a lot of damage. Why do we remove people at the peak of their efficacy? Why?
That is the questions we should be asking. And that's what we should... See, we don't have... Maybe we do, maybe I don't know, but we don't have a strategic group, a war room within the presidency where critical thinking, put politics aside, put, sentiments aside. Let us think about Nigeria today and Nigeria tomorrow. Where are we headed? Why is the government complicit if they are? Why is the military complicit if they are? Why are individuals? Follow the money trail. I mean, we've had this problem going to 20 years now. Nobody has been able to say these are the funders. Nobody has been arrested. Nobody has been prosecuted. And it's still ongoing. And we're pouring money down this money hole. Now the fact is it a way, are we using terrorism and insurgency as a way of diverting funds? Are we really serious about tackling this? Now, Donald Trump has come all out and intervened in his own way. Personally, I don't think that will amount to anything. First and foremost, the US cannot invade a country without Congress approving it. Yeah. Even though Donald Trump has done that in Venezuela, or at least is trying to do that in Venezuela without Congress, and has been bombing ships off the seas, without Congress approving. Right.
Allowed.
Well, now the fact remains is this: if you look at the history of US intervention, military intervention, it has been disastrous. Since World War II.
Well, people point to the 1950s, I was talking with some people, and they point to the 1950s and say, maybe that's what they want for Nigeria, which is what happened on the Korean Peninsula, where you have an American affiliated South Korea and the communist affiliated North Korea, that, you know, if northern Nigeria wants to, you know, follow this way and southern Nigeria doesn't want to, perhaps we should split along ideological lines and let's see, because South Korea is literally the example of capitalists and communists living side by side. So maybe we need to, and I mean, that talk is gaining ground because, you know, when people feel helpless in a country, they see anybody intervening, regardless of their intentions, as a savior.
But then, do we have ideological differences?
Well, we do. If there's one difference that Nigeria, there are two we have managed to keep: tribe and religion. We may not have moral, financial, economic, ideological, but in terms of sectarian, tribe and religion, we have managed to keep them on the front burner, regardless of our educational level, our exposure, everything. We've managed to remain very primal and tribal when it comes to religion and tribe.
Let's think back to Niger Republic, just our neighbor in the north here. 2013, if my dates are correct, 2013, the U.S. sent special forces to rescue, and the reasons were the same. It was jihadist Islamic insurgents. That was the reason why they went in there. When did they withdraw? 11 and a half years later. It was actually the coup that stopped it. So historically, anywhere US steps into, look at Afghanistan, look at the mess that happened there, look at Vietnam, look at Libya. You know, the US has not had a successful military intervention since World War II. The Gulf War was a disaster. The only time the US succeeds in its military intervention is when they go covert, where they are targeting a particular person, Saddam Hussein, Muammar Gaddafi, Osama bin Laden. You know, they go in, they do that covert, and they're out. Even when they came into Nigeria to rescue the kidnapped Americans. Yeah. That's where their specialty lies. But once they come into a country and say, okay, yeah, we're going to, bring boots into the ground, that same gunboat diplomacy has never worked for them.
All right, as we wrap up this conversation, because it's going to go a long way, right? I mean, we can't wrap it up in just less than 30 minutes. What is your advice to the Nigerian presidency as U.S. President Donald Trump has made this threat? Other stakeholders in the U.S. are saying we shouldn't take that threat lightly. What is your advice, especially as we're anticipating some sort of meeting between the two presidents?
Yeah, it's simply diplomacy. Now, like you mentioned, we don't have an ambassador yet, but that shouldn't even be the reason why we shouldn't sit around the table. We have an embassy, we have a consulate in the U.S. We have people there, we have seasoned diplomats, career diplomats, who can sit and have meaningful discussions. An ambassador is just a political appointee. However, he or she heads that mission. Now, we have to engage and continue to engage on the one hand. My advice, should the president visit the US and talk to the president? No. No. Because the issue itself is not the religious killings. US issue goes far beyond, the religious killings is just a reason to do what they want to do. So if you're going to the US to discuss whether Christians are being killed, that's even why there was even that thing about, well, even if the president comes, you should meet with the vice president, because that's not even part of what they want to discuss. It goes beyond that. Nigeria is a critical, crucial, important, rich country in Africa, strategically placed. Now, we are going through scramble for Africa too, with the US on one side, the EU on one side, China on one side, Russia on the other side. Everybody wants a piece, because over 300 years, these same minerals and resources that Africa has still exist underground. It has been exploited. People's blood has been shed, everything from diamonds to coal to gold to oil over the years. And it's still there. the reserves we have can last till the end of time. And so we, as Nigerians and as Africans, also have to wake up to that reality and say, listen, we've gone through the scramble for Africa. Yes, they've caved us out, the Portuguese, the French, Now, Africa must take control of Africa. We have to start building from within. So when threats come like this from Trump and France and the rest of them, we should diplomatically park them. Come up with an African strategy for Africa. God has blessed us with resources. God has blessed us with the population. God has blessed us with people. What we don't have is management. And so we have to ensure that our leaders, all this nonsense that we see people defecting, that is not helping us. We have to start looking for people who can think critically, who can solve problems, and who can move Africa from where we are today to the next. It's not jumping parties. It's not, waving flags or waving brooms. We have to be serious as a people. Otherwise, everybody would want to still impose the same diplomacy on us.
And that's a strong way to end this session. Thank you once again, Dr. Amobi, for coming through. And we hope that the presidency heeds to this advice and does something about it. Right, we have to get serious in this country.
We are not.
I'm eager to know what your reaction is, but let me just let you go on this one. All right, Dr. Amobi, thank you once again.
Thank you very much for having me.
The morning show returns, and when we come back, all roads would lead to Anambra State. We'll be gaining insights on the preparedness of the electorate to come out and vote on Saturday, November 8th. Stay tuned.